It's truly an honor to be here. Thank you, Soren, for the privilege of being able to share this story with you. I'd like to begin by introducing you all to someone very dear to my life. This is my grandmother's eldest brother, Dr. Govindappa Venkataswamy, known to many on this side of the world simply as Dr. V, for obvious reasons. Venkataswamy is not easy to say. The two portraits above him, the mother and the Sri Aurobindo, these were two key spiritual influences in his life. Every morning for the last 3 years of Dr. V's life, I had a daily 7 a.m. appointment with him. And I would sit on the other side of that desk, and we would read together from one of Sri Aurobindo's books. It was called Savitri, and it told the story of the evolution of consciousness, and it spoke to the perfectibility of the human spirit. I'd like to share a few lines with you. This is how he began his day every day for 50 years or more. He began with a visit to the meditation room and then an immersion in wisdom. So the lines. There is a power within that knows beyond our knowings. We are greater than our thoughts. Sometimes Earth unveils that vision here. To live, to love, these are signs of infinite things. Now I want you to do something else. I want you to imagine this gentleman coming to you about 37 years ago, and he's going to pitch you a business idea. He's just newly retired. He has a crippling disease, by the way, and he has an idea to tackle a global problem. And he says, how about you and I put all our life savings on the line? We start a company. We don't take any external funding. We give away 60% of our services for free. We market exclusively to people who can't pay us. We commit to world-class quality. We don't take donations, and we will not do any fundraising. Are you in? Consider for a moment what you might have said to him at that time. And now think upon this. The organization that he founded on that seemingly absurd framework is today the largest provider of eye care in the world, on the planet. So I come from a family, as you heard, it's actually 24 ophthalmologists now. We have a few more in the pipeline, 3 generations. I sometimes think that I worked on this film and a book about their story as my way of apology to them for not being an eye doctor. But on a more serious note, like was said in the introduction, I really have come to believe that certain stories are not unlike eye surgery in that they do have the capacity to help us see the world and each other and our place here a little bit better. And this story is definitely one of those. This is a man who aligned head, heart, and hands. He integrated a heart of service with deep spiritual aspirations and the best practices of business. And the model that he created has gone on to literally light millions of eyes. And it's a story that begins at the southern tip of India, in a little village where in 1918 a boy named Govindappa Venkataswamy was born. He was the eldest of 5 children, and he grew up walking barefoot to school, tending the family buffalo, writing his lessons in the sand. But by the age of 10, he'd lost 3 cousins due to childbirth complications. No doctor in the village, no one they could run to for help. So as a little boy, that seeded in him the conviction that when he grew up, he needed to become a doctor and prevent such untimely tragedies. He made his way to and through medical school, and he had plans of becoming an obstetrician. In his early 30s, he was struck by a rare and severe form of rheumatoid arthritis. It completely twisted and froze his fingers out of shape. He was bedridden for 2 years. It's a chronic condition, so he never fully recovered. He called pain his constant companion in life. He never married either. When he'd recovered enough strength to return to the field of medicine, he was told that his condition barred him from obstetrics. So he ended up in the Department of Ophthalmology. Sometimes I think that our greatest vulnerabilities are what drive us to the doorstep of our greatest strengths. He taught himself to cut and operate the eye with those fingers. His surgeries were impeccable. There are 37 million blind people in the world. 80% of that blindness is curable. A large part of it is cataract blindness. A simple operation can cure sight. Dr. V in those early days worked like a man possessed, around the clock. Those fingers personally performed over 100,000 sight-restoring surgeries. And that was in his time as a government servant alone. And then he hit the age of 58. That was mandatory retirement age at that time. But he wasn't ready to go out and play golf. So he started in 1976 an 11-bed eye clinic with his 5 brothers and sisters and their husbands and wives. They were all eye doctors. The benefits of arranged marriage kind of kicked in there. And they put their life savings on the line. They sold the family jewelry. They put a mortgage on the house. And they started this with very little money, no business plan, and no safety net. But they had a mission. And their mission was to eliminate needless blindness. 37 million blind people. They had 11 beds. It was a bit audacious. Fast forward 37 odd years later, they've got 50 different facilities. As we said, they're the largest eye care provider on the planet. What does that mean? In the last 37 years, they've seen over 38 million patients. They've done over 5 million surgeries. And the vast majority of that has been done for free or at ultra-subsidized rates. So it's turned a lot of heads. You know, in 2008, Gates gave them the Global Health Award. The following year, they got the Hilton Humanitarian Prize. The same year, Fast Company named them one of the most 50 innovative companies in the world. And in 2010, Time magazine had Arvind's chairman on their list of the 100 most influential people in the world. So there he was with Lady Gaga and Clinton, and it was a little surreal. And for the last more than 20 years now, the case study on Arvind is a mandatory, it's a required reading for every MBA student that goes to Harvard. And we even had a few years ago, we had Google's co-founder fly in for a visit. So it's, what's all this excitement about? You know, there are certain things about Arvind that come off larger than life. And this next slide sort of illustrates that. It's a comparison of Arvind's surgical productivity with that of other countries. And the bar that looks like a runaway train there is Arvind's. So the average surgeon there does about 2,000 surgeries a year. The national average in India is 400. In this country, the US isn't on that graph, but it's about 200 here. So phenomenal productivity. But is this just a developing world story? Is there anything that's relevant about it for the West? The next slide compares Arvind's volumes with that of the National Health System in the United Kingdom, which is their main provider of healthcare. The NHS does about 500,000 eye surgeries a year. Arvind does between 300 and 400,000. So a single organization in the developing world does about 60% of the volume of the entire UK. But that's not the punchline. It costs the United Kingdom 1.6, or it costs the NHS 1.6 billion pounds to deliver that care. It costs Arvind less than 1% of that. Now let's talk about quality, because that does come up. You know, you've got high volume and you've got the low cost. They've done quality comparisons with the clinical outcomes of Arvind surgeons and that with the United Kingdom center there. Across 20 different complication types, Arvind's quality outcomes met or exceeded that of its Western counterparts. So we're talking a high quality, high volume, low cost system. It's in that sweet spot that companies all over the world are striving for. And where does it come from? Where does that kind of breakthrough innovation come from? Some experts say that it comes when you self-impose creative constraints on your situation. So if you're working with the same set of constraints that everyone else is working with, you tend to come up with the same solutions, or at best, incremental innovation. But when you throw in bonus rules for yourself, when you kind of make the game harder, that's when you have a shot at really changing the way it's played. And that's what Dr. V and his team did. They brought in these 3 rules and they seeded them into the DNA of the organization right from the very start. And they were really simple. We can't turn anyone away, we can't compromise on quality, and we must be self-reliant. So this meant that whatever Aravind did over the course of its history, it would have to do it with compassion, with excellence, and with its own resources. So think about that framework for a moment. What this did, it didn't make it easy by a long shot, but what it did was it gave Aravind's founders the liberty to pursue their outlandish mission without compromising their integrity. This framework would not push them to compromise their principles. So you're looking at, a set of constraints that push this organization and its people to overturn the conventional rules of business and to come up with this upside-down business model. And all of those things, those constraints there, it wasn't driven by some sort of business strategy. It was driven by a mindset of selfless service. And these words, selflessness, service, generosity, compassion, we don't often think of them as business tools. They're not just tools in this system. They are the drivers. They're the animating force, the engine behind this. There's another line from Savitri, on inner values hangs the outer plan. That's how it was with this organization. And Dr. V kept a lot of journals in his life, 100 in all. I read them. Doctor's handwriting, it was not easy. Beautiful, though. And there were 2 things that repeatedly would come up, 2 statements, 2 aspirations, burning aspirations that came up repeatedly. The first one was to give sight for all. And the second was to see all as one. Those 2 aspirations arc between the practical and the profound. And the story of Aravind dances on that arc. So on the one hand, you have the ultra-practical concern of how do you create a service delivery system to end one form of human suffering. And on the other, how do you do that from a mindset that is rooted in an awareness of our fundamental interconnection? The practical and the profound. So serve the 100%. We're in a world that, there's this tug of war between the 99% and the 1%. Aravind straight up made this commitment to serving the 100%. And to do this, they ripped the price tag off of a sight-restoring surgery and made it available for free for those who needed it in a country where there are 12 million blind people, and the majority live on less than $2 a day. So, pretty baffling move considering they also had a constraint of self-reliance. And then they did something even stranger. They said, we're going to let the patient decide whether they pay or not. So there's no means assessments, no eligibility criteria. A barefoot farmer can come in and get paid services. The man who would become the future president of India can wander into the free section. And that actually did happen, by the way. President Abdul Kalam forgot his wallet. He strayed away from his security team and ended up getting wonderful service at the free hospital, and he was thrilled. And the system is geared for that. Nothing would stop anyone from accessing what they choose. And the idea behind this, one of the things that Dr. V stressed over and over again, he said, Aravind is not here just to mechanically restore people's sight. We're here to affirm dignity. So they design for dignity in this model. And we're talking about a country where when you go blind in rural India, life expectancy drops to about 2 or 3 years. Blindness is a fatal disease in India, where sometimes when you lose blindness, when you lose your vision, you lose your livelihood, you lose your place in your family, oftentimes your place in the community, you lose your own self-worth. And so his question was, the how of what we do is as important as the why. How do we affirm dignity of these people who show up? And so they did that through a unique and compassionate fee system. In this self-selecting user fee system, patients can select a fee that goes all the way from 0 up to market rates. So they decide. And there's no, the sense is that options affirm dignity. And patients who can pay and are willing to, the money from them covers costs for those who can't. It's the same doctors who operate on the free and paying patients. Service differentiation happens at the level of add-ons. So a free patient might stay in a shared dorm with a shared restroom. A paying patient might decide they want an air conditioner in their room and an attached bathroom, an extra bed for their attendant. But other than that, the idea behind this is really to meet people where they are and to maximize for service, not profit. I'm going to skip this one for now and go on to this. So one of the things that happened when Aravind began this process, they were offering free surgery, and they found a very curious thing. Not very many people were coming. People they knew desperately needed the service weren't showing up. And so enlightenment came to them in the form of a beggar who was blind. And he said to them, well, you tell me your surgery is free, but to get there, I need a bus. Once I get there, I need a place to stay, I need food. I'm elderly, I can't come alone. If my daughter comes with me, she loses a day wage. So your free service costs me 100 rupees. Free doesn't automatically translate to affordable. So what did Aravind do with that information? It's not a transport company, it's not, responsible for meals. It decided to own the barriers. It decided to take responsibility for all of it. So it sends medical teams, doctors and nurses out into the villages where they'll set up an eye camp where they screen hundreds, sometimes thousands of patients in the span of a few hours. Those requiring glasses are fitted and given them on the spot. Those requiring surgery are bussed back to the main hospital where they're given food, lodging, treatment, return transport, follow-up care, completely free of charge. This happens 2,200 times a year, 40 to 50 times a week. 600 different locations, 500 different community partners. All of these camps take place in partnership with community sponsors. Aravind does this in order to build that ownership into the community. So this drives about 45% of the volumes that Aravind sees. It's tremendous in that sense. But the even bigger thing is the trust that it generates, the goodwill that it generates. The free patients who come to Arvind's system aren't seen as just consumers of a service. They're seen as contributors. They go back. They become the strongest word-of-mouth marketeers for this organization. They motivate the community. They mobilize more patients. And the whole systems around Aravind are designed for those patients. So it's a really interesting thing. It's not a model where the rich, it's not one-way traffic, rich, contributing to the poor. That impoverished patient is as important in this system. So it's really, it's really mutual. Be radically open. Dr. V was boyish in his excitement about new things and his ability to learn from the weirdest places. And this was one of his most, and he was a great synthesizer too. He would integrate, he integrated East and West, he integrated ancient and modern, he integrated science and spirituality, and he integrated McDonald's. So what does blindness have to do with burgers? When Dr. V came to the States in the early 70s and 80s, he was fascinated by the golden arches that he saw everywhere. And he completely sidestepped the public health implications of this global chain. And he was really looking at the standardization, the power of that product reach and the recognition, the reliability, the scale. And he said over and over again, if we can provide eye care the way McDonald's provides burgers, the problem of blindness is gone. People laughed, and then they watched him do it. So he took, the assembly line method. He took a slew of optimization techniques. He looked at every stage of the workflow of a patient, and he brought in all these process improvements. This comes vividly to life in the operating rooms at Aravind, where you have rows of beds and you have these surgeons. Every surgeon is assisted by 4 highly trained nurses. And as the surgeon is finishing an operation on one side, the nurses have prepped the patient on the next side. It's choreographed to a T. And the lag time between surgeries is the time it takes for that surgeon to swing the microscope over to the other side, do his scrub or her scrub, and start the operation. So the fastest surgeons, the fastest ones at Aravind, not the slow pokes, the fastest ones can do a cataract surgery in 3.5 minutes. 3.5 minutes. And those women that you saw, the nurses, they come from the villages around Madurai. They're high school graduates, and they're trained in an intense program to become nurses and paramedics and technicians. And the program that they go through is accredited by the same board that does the accreditation for nursing programs here. So it is high quality. Now, it's Aravin's financial sustainability. That piece really captures people's attention. This is a spectacularly profitable organization. I think a couple years ago they had an operating surplus of $13 million on revenue of 27 million. Forbes called it an accomplishment worthy of any for-profit venture. This is a nonprofit. All of their patient services, all of their growth and expansion is covered by patient revenue. So they're able to hold that idea of universal access to their services and that idea of self-reliance very comfortably together. And a lot of healthcare and a lot of business tends to be driven by this notion of scarcity, by a fundamental assumption that there isn't enough to go around. And Dr. V came at this whole model with a mindset of sufficiency. His motto very often was, do the work, the money will follow. Do the work, the money will follow. And this organization always felt like it had enough, even when it clearly didn't. It used to baffle granting agencies, funding agencies, when they would turn down offers of money. And what that mindset did, was it allowed it to identify, and implement resources in a very different way. It allowed them to look at that high school village girl and say, I see a world-class medical professional. It allowed them to look at that impoverished patient and say, I see a fierce patient advocate. One of the things Dr. V used to tell doctors, when they would come to him and say, oh, Dr. V, I can't find a good nurse, I can't find a good administrator, I can't find a good technician. And he would laugh and he would tell them, Doctor, you don't just find people, you have to build them. And that's what they did. They built them. 100% of Aravin's nurses are trained in-house. 95% of its doctors trained in-house. 15% of all the eye doctors in India have undergone some form of training at Aravind. It regularly trains residents from Harvard, from Mass Eye and Ear, from Johns Hopkins, all over the world. They come here because this is not just a cataract hospital, it's a tertiary care facility. So they have all the super specialty clinics in eye care. One of the things that element of self-sustainability allowed it to do, it gave it the freedom to make these very unorthodox decisions. So there was a time in the 1980s when intraocular lens surgery had revolutionized the way cataract surgery was done. So there was an implant that was put in once the natural lens was taken out. And that cost about $150 to $300 when it first came out. Way too expensive for the developing world. But Aravind wanted that high-quality service for all of its patients. And at the time, every single, or most of the international eye care providers, including the WHO, was very strongly opposed to having that technology come into the developing world, come into India. And they even went as far as to say it would be irresponsible to encourage an addiction to a technology that this country cannot afford. And Aravind listened very politely to that debate and then went ahead and did it anyway. They started an internationally certified manufacturing facility. They began to manufacture world-class IOLs. They brought the price down from $300 to $10 and then drove it down further to $2. Then they exported those lenses to 100. Now they export them to 170 countries around the world. And they don't... And they don't just do, so there's 10 million people now in the world who see with these lenses. They own roughly 10% of the market share globally. And they also make ophthalmic pharmaceuticals, sutures, equipments, and a whole range of things for ophthalmology. And so there you go, there's a story. And now, it's very clear that they've got their finger on something. They've got the secret sauce. They've got, they've got some magic in there. And so what happens when you have something that powerful? Do you build a fortress around it? Do you hold it close? Do you guard it with your life? They chose instead, this is the manufacturing facility, Oral Lab. They chose instead to train their competition. So they not only are open source with their model, they don't not only throw open the doors, they go out and actively bring people in and say, hey, we can help you, we can help you. They work in about 60 different countries, hundreds of hospitals. They've trained thousands of people in this way. And the idea is that they really believe that when you hoard your strength, when you hoard your expertise, you limit your impact. Sharing your strength amplifies it manyfold. That's a deep conviction for them. This is the Meenakshi temple in the center of the town where I grew up, in the center of the town where Madurai is. That's part of its skyline. And Dr. V would look at these temples. It's about 2,500 years old. And it was built by generations of rulers across different dynasties. And he would say institutions need to be built like temples. Not the religious aspect of it, but that longevity, that idea of building something timeless, building something that multiple people can hold a vision for across different generations, that's not meant for the profit of one person, but for the benefit of humanity. A place to practice truth. A place where head, heart, and hands align. That's what he wanted. That's the vision he held for an institution. And that's the founding team there. After Dr. V passed away, all the buildings, the building they're sitting on, the buildings behind them are all part of it's a fraction of the empire that they created. And I'm giving you such a quick snapshot, of the flow of things. It is much more nuanced, complex, riddled, gritty struggles. It has all of that in there. But I wanted to show you these are the second generation and the third generation. That's my family. And there's 4,000 other people there, right? These are ordinary people. They're not superheroes. Ordinary people, they have their fallibilities, they have their struggles. And yet, these ordinary people came together around some extraordinary commitments. And they built something beautiful. There's a few quick takeaways. Takeaways is such a reductive word. A few insights. I don't know. There are little nuggets that I think of as Dr. V's unwritten directives. The first was to stay rooted in compassion. What he showed and what he demonstrated, that was when skillfully channeled, compassion can drive and dictate scale, efficiency, productivity, transparency, equality, inclusion. And it can do all these things in such a way that each element reinforces the other and strengthens the whole. And it creates a finely tuned system that benefits everybody. Serve and deserve. When you make when the core of your energy and attention goes towards serving unconditionally, the boundaries of your perception shift. You start to see value and relevance in very unexpected places. You generate trust and goodwill. Your work acquires a magnetic quality. It sustains and aligns resources to your mission in a way that just money can't do. Create a movement, not dominance. Not all of us can go out and train the competition, but we can all stand to be part of something bigger, to be generous, and to stand to benefit from that. And the last one, practice for perfect vision. This was something that Dr. V returned to over and over again. He knew that just as there are external forms of blindness, there are internal forms of blindness. Anger, greed, jealousy, all of these things cloud our vision, make it hard to see what is and what the right next step is. So he believed that the evolution of organizations hinges on the evolution of the individuals within them. And that clarity in thought and action comes from a discipline of mind and heart. And when you commit to sharpening your self-awareness, and when you commit to working at the boundaries of your compassion, then you tap into a higher wisdom. It informs and transforms your work. You become a more perfect instrument for your highest calling. I want to give you a few of Dr. V's words in his own voice.
I used to sit with the ordinary village man because I am from a village. And suddenly he turned around and then you seem to contact his inner being. You seem to be one with him. But here is a soul which has got all the simplicity of confidence. Doctor, whatever you say, I accept it. An implicit faith in you. And then you responded. Here is an old lady who has got so much of faith in me, I must do my best for her. When we grow in spiritual consciousness, we identify ourselves with all that is in the world. So there is no exploitation. It is ourselves we are helping. It is ourselves we are healing.
So this was his retirement project. And you look at that story, and at one level, it's the story of a village man who had this David and Goliath, situation, stood up against this intractable odd, fought the good fight, and won. And yet it's not just that. It's a story that sits at the intersection of so many things. Social entrepreneurship, good business, moral leadership, family business, sustainability, all of these different things. And yet it fills and spills over them to touch, I think, everyone's life. Because at its core, this is a story about our individual potential and our collective possibility. This is a story that, for me, it demonstrates without a shadow of a doubt that in helping, in serving others, we serve ourselves. Our limitations do not define us. And embedded in the human spirit, there is a strength and wisdom that can rise to all our greatest challenges. And together, we can and we must light the world. Thank you.